Welcome to the Past in Pictures channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. A tarantula infected with the parasitic fungus cordyceps. This type of fungus invades the host's body, controlling its movements and feeding from within until the insect or arachnid dies. After that, the fungus grows out of the body, releasing spores that can infect new hosts. Indigenous children are seen in a school run by the Canadian government and Christian churches between 1930 and 1970. These institutions were part of the residential school system created to forcefully assimilate Indigenous peoples to European culture. Thousands of children were separated from their families, and many suffered abuse and deep cultural loss. Urban pollution levels being tested on human volunteers in 1956. The experiment was part of scientific studies on the effects of smog in large cities, a growing problem after post-war industrial expansion. The image reveals the beginning of research that would lead to environmental laws and emission control. Norma Ann Sykes, photographed in 1955, was a British model and actress who later became known by the stage name Sabrina. At the time, she gained recognition for her striking appearance and for appearing on television programs and in illustrated magazines. The image represents the beginning of her career as one of the beauty symbols of the United Kingdom in the 1950s. Hunters capture a lion in Africa around the 1930s to be sent to a European zoo. The image shows part of the wild animal capture expeditions that were common in the colonial period. These events reflected European interest in exhibiting exotic species in circuses and zoological parks. Vietnamese orphans arrive in the United States in 1975. The group was part of Operation Baby Lift, an initiative carried out at the end of the Vietnam War to evacuate thousands of children from the country. The photo records the moment when military transport aircraft land, bringing the young refugees for adoption and shelter on American soil. A family poses for a photograph during the Spanish influenza pandemic in 1918. Everyone wears protective masks, including the pet cat. The image shows how the use of masks became an essential measure in the attempt to prevent the spread of the disease in that period. Soldiers raise artillery pieces up a cliff in 1917 during the First World War. The operation required great physical effort and coordination, since the guns needed to be positioned in high locations to gain better firing range. The image shows the harsh conditions faced on the fronts of that era. In the scorching summer of 1929, a strong heat wave hit the United States, with temperatures above 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The photo shows wax figures in a shopping center partially melting because of the extreme heat. The episode was remembered as one of the hottest summers of the time, affecting cities and causing losses in several regions of the country. Nikola Tesla, seated in his laboratory in Colorado Springs in the United States in December 1899. He is beside his magnifying transmitter, a high-voltage generator that produced visible electrical discharges. The photo shows an important moment in his experiments with electricity and the wireless transmission of energy. The skull belongs to Sue, the most complete Tyrannosaurus ever discovered. About 90% of her bones were recovered, making her a unique find in paleontology. The fossils were found in 1990 in the United States. Today, Sue is on display at the Field Museum in Chicago. The Swedish actress Anita Ekberg in a 1950 photo at the beginning of her artistic career. During that time, she was starting to stand out as a model and actress in Hollywood, before achieving international fame a few years later with the 1960 film La Dolce Vita. The Italian team takes part in the opening ceremony of the first edition of the Paralympic Games, held in Rome in 1960. The event marked the official beginning of international sports competitions for athletes with disabilities. The image shows a historic moment that gave rise to the modern Paralympic movement. Students at the University of Cambridge in 1897 hung the figure of a woman cyclist during a protest against the granting of full degrees to female students. The act symbolized resistance to academic equality between men and women. At that time, the students could attend classes, but they did not receive the same recognition. A Pomona College student takes part in the weigh-in, a practice in which the football team measured and recorded the physical proportions of newly arrived female students. The photo was taken in California, in the United States, in 1954. The event reflects the gender norms and social behavior of the time, now criticized for its discriminatory nature. Andre the Giant beside his stunt double on the set of the film The Princess Bride in 1986. Known for his impressive height and physical strength, Andre played the character Fezzik in the production. The image shows the behind the scenes of filming and highlights the preparation needed to bring the story's charismatic giant to life. United States Marines during the evacuation of Hungnam in Korea in December 1950. The episode took place during the Korean War, when United Nations forces evacuated thousands of soldiers and civilians in intense cold and under enemy attack. The operation became known as one of the largest military sea rescues in history. This 1954 photo shows the Spanish artist Salvador Dalí using his own mustache as a paintbrush. He was one of the greatest representatives of surrealism, known for his creativity and eccentricity. The scene reflects his provocative and humorous style. Dalí was already world famous for works such as The Persistence of Memory. Marilyn Monroe, at 22 years old, during a dance class in Hollywood in 1949. At the time, she was still at the beginning of her career and was preparing for roles that required greater ease on stage. The image shows her dedication to improving her artistic skills before she became one of the greatest icons of world cinema. The Bloody Tower of Salonika in Greece in 1920. The place was known for having been used during Ottoman rule as a prison where prisoners were taken to suffer torture. The tower, also called the White Tower, became a historic landmark of Thessaloniki and a symbol of its complex history. Recorded in 1940, this image shows Ronald Reagan working as a model at the University of Southern California. Before following a political career, he worked as an actor and a radio announcer. During that period, Reagan was taking his first steps in Hollywood. The photo reveals a lesser-known side of his youth. A member of the cast of the film The Wizard of Oz is seen trying on a costume backstage in 1939. The production, filmed in Hollywood, became a landmark of cinema for its innovative use of color and visual effects. The image shows part of the costume creation process that helped make the classic timeless. People visit the crown of the Statue of Liberty in New York City, United States in 1947. The photograph shows tourists inside the metal structure of the crown, with a flag being raised in the background. The monument, inaugurated in 1886, still allowed public access to its crown at that time. Japanese women posed before going to the beach in Japan in 1946. Two-piece swimsuits, introduced in the 1930s, were already part of the fashion of the time. The image shows the atmosphere of reconstruction and freedom in the country soon after the end of the Second World War. Women workers take a lunch break at the Bethlehem Fairfield Shipyard in Baltimore, Maryland in 1943. The site was one of the main shipbuilding plants in the United States during the Second World War. The image shows the fundamental role of women in the war industry, replacing men who served on the fronts. Fishermen carry out night fishing in Hawaii in 1948. Lighting the sea with torches and lanterns, they draw fish to the surface, following a local tradition practiced for generations. The image shows the harmony between ancestral technique and coastal life in the post-war Hawaiian archipelago. A French army dog around 1910. During the early 20th century, trained dogs were widely used to carry messages, locate the wounded, and transport small supplies among troops. The image shows one of these faithful animals who played important roles in military and rescue missions. A motorhome in the United States during the 1920s. The vehicle, adapted for long trips, represents one of the earliest forms of recreational transport with room for sleeping and cooking. The image shows the beginning of the culture of travel on wheels, which would become popular in the following decades. A prototype of a touchscreen telephone developed by Apple in 1983. The experimental device was created years before the release of the iPhone and was part of the company's early tests with graphical interfaces and touch commands. The image shows one of the initial attempts to unite telephone technology and the personal computer. Wives of the harem of the Persian Shah Nasser al-Din Shah Qajar in the 1870s. The photograph shows the women posing with traditional clothing and adornments typical of the Persian court. The record offers a rare glimpse of life inside the palace during the Qajar dynasty period in 19th century Iran. A woman uses a portable Sony television in the back seat of her automobile in the United States in 1963. The device was a transistor-based micro-television model designed to be taken on trips or used outside the home. The image shows how consumer technology already sought mobility and convenience in that period. The Rhino, an experimental all-terrain vehicle, was developed in 1954. Designed to test new mobility technologies, the model had large wheels and a raised structure, allowing it to cross uneven terrain with ease. The image shows one of the earliest prototypes of vehicles aimed at transport in extreme conditions. A woman caring for dogs in England in 1962. She devoted her entire life to sheltering and protecting abandoned animals, caring for more than 600 dogs over the years. The image shows her tireless work for animal welfare and compassion for homeless animals. A nose-shaping device, 1944. According to the Atlantic magazine, this device was used with the promise of permanently changing the shape of the wearer's nose. The item was part of a series of popular beauty inventions of the time that aimed to modify appearance without resorting to plastic surgery. A Swedish policewoman on patrol during the harsh winter of the 1970s. Dressed in a heavy uniform and a coat appropriate for the cold, she represents the growing female presence in the country's security forces. The image shows the daily life of police work amid the severe weather conditions of Northern Europe. The Canadian-South African model Mae Musk, then 19 years old, poses for a fashion photograph in the mid-1960s. Born on April 19, 1948, in Regina, Saskatchewan, she began her modeling career in her teenage years. Over the years, she also became a dietitian and an author. Jane Mansfield walks through the streets of New York with her daughter, Jane Marie, in 1953. The two appear smiling, wearing elegant clothing typical of the time. The image shows Mansfield at the start of her career, before she became one of the biggest Hollywood stars of the 1950s and 1960s. Greek men pose for a color photograph made around the 1920s. The image was recorded using the autochrome Lumiere process, one of the first color photography techniques in the world. The portrait shows the traditional clothing of the time and offers a rare glimpse of Greece in the early 20th century. The American model and actress Anita Colby poses beside mannequins identical to her during a photo session in 1954. The image was created as an artistic composition to highlight her beauty and elegance, hallmarks of her career in fashion and cinema. The photo portrays the fictional character Jason Voorhees from the 1980 film Friday the 13th, imagined as submerged in the fictional Crystal Lake. The film presents Jason as an antagonist who returns after drowning at the camp. The Michelin Band was a group created to promote the Michelin tire brand. Its members wore costumes made of tires, forming a band with an unusual look. The image, recorded in 1928, reflects the creative marketing strategies of the time. A man listens to a radio that only works after coins are inserted in Washington, District of Columbia, in the year 1922. The device was part of one of the earliest attempts to monetize broadcasting, allowing paid access to transmissions. The image shows an early phase in the popularization of radio as a means of communication and entertainment. American sailors pose behind their duffel bags laid out during an inspection at the Great Lakes Naval Training Station in 1940. The photograph, made by Bernard Hoffman for Life magazine, shows the rigor and military discipline of the pre-Second World War period in the United States. A girls' high school basketball team around 1910. The photograph shows the young athletes posing with period uniforms and a classic basketball. The record represents the early years of girls' sports in schools at a time when women's participation in activities was beginning to gain space. The photograph, titled "The Seesaw," was taken in 1902. It shows children playing on a plank swing, known as a seesaw, one of the most common pastimes of childhood in the early 20th century. The image portrays a simple and joyful moment of daily life from that time in a rural or park setting. Known as the greatest baseball player in the world, this man weighed about 450 pounds and was photographed in Emporium, Pennsylvania in 1905. The image shows popular interest in records and physical curiosities in the early 20th century. Such portraits were common at fairs and in newspapers of the time.